And we're live. You can start.
Hi everyone, my name is Jason and I'm a developer at Ushahidi. Today I'm going to take you through installing V3 on an Ubuntu Trusty server. So let's go right ahead and use the instructions on the URL is docs.ushahidi.org, and there's a link, there's an install link over there. So if you could actually follow me on the link
Are you trying to share your screen?
Yes.
Okay, there's a, on the side where you have the chat, there's a green arrow screenshot on the left side of the Hangout. It's okay, it's early in the morning. We understand.
Okay. Okay.
Awesome, we can see your screen now.
You can see my terminal. Okay. So the first thing you want to do is get your prerequisites down. And on an Ubuntu Trusty server, that was quite simple for me because I use apt-get to actually install MySQL, PHP, Apache. You'll also want to get your PXP extensions installed, curl, GD, IMAP, JSON, mcrypt, and MySQL drivers. And then the other thing you want to do is actually get Composer installed, the instructions on the Composer homepage about how that's done. My personal preference is actually to get this installed globally. So then, after getting your requirements down, the next thing you want to do is I'm going to go right ahead and set up the database. And on my setup, it's me going into my DB and following the instructions. I'll go right ahead and create the Ushahidi database. I'm going to use a grants on the instructions, mainly for demonstration purposes. Yes, and I've used sample user Ushahidi user, and you can see the password there from the doc. The next thing I want to do is actually go on and set up my .m file. So platform is a directory I cloned the repo from, or rather on. And, I'm going to create a .m file. There you go. So if you look at the .m file, it has the username and password I used to set up the database. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Next thing I want to do is actually enable URL rewrites. This is usually done by running a command for Apache. I'm using Apache right now. So you do that, you're actually going to, okay, right now mine is already enabled, but whenever you want to enable rewrite, that's what you want to do. It makes the next step of actually copying the HT access from HTTP docs a little bit easier. So basically what you want to do is that actually you're not going to copy anything. Actually, all you need to do is rename template.htaccess to .htaccess, and then you've got rewrite enabled on your platform. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. Assuming you've got mode rewrite enabled, I'm going to keep that note there about not being able to enable rewrites. So what I'm going to go ahead and do right now is enable writing to the logs, cache, and upload directory. So there's an instruction there about changing ownership of your logs, cache, and uploads to the web server user. And I'm going to go ahead and just type, change the ownership of. Before I do that, I actually have to go this. So my logs directory, the cache directory, and media upload directory are in a directory called application. I'm going to go ahead and change the owner to so that the web user owns the directory. Let's go ahead and actually do all this one go. There we go. So changing the ownership of the directory. The reason why we do this is just to make sure that those directories are writable by the application. Next, we want to do is install our dependencies. Assuming we manage to install Composer correctly, I'm going to go ahead and run bin update. Bin update is going to call a bunch of programs underneath, including Composer, just to make sure we get all our dependencies installed. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. You can see it's downloading my dependencies from Composer. Using Composer. Might take a while, but and this is done mostly. The API is ready to go.
So while we're waiting for Composer to finish running, I know there are a couple of people who've asked about whether they can run this installation on Macs or on Windows. Do we have support for that just yet? Because I know we've been driving guys to just install either using the Heroku app or just directly on Linux.
Yeah, mostly to get this working correctly, you won't use Linux on mostly. Best bet is actually to run a recent version of Ubuntu on the server. 14.04 going forward is great. Mac and Windows support is really not tested. So I think you want to actually stick with running off Linux for now, at least for hosting the API.
Okay, sounds good then.
Yes, watching the packages come down.
I like the pink on your terminal screen.
Yes. The next that might happen, and so what happened? I just actually, did end up again. with updated permissions.
Okay. So, another question, as this is still running. Since we launched, what are some of the common issues that guys tend to have when they're installing Ushahidi, and what would your recommendation be to them to fix stuff?
Mostly, it's the most common issue I've had is actually setting the .m file for some reason. Sometimes that's not. Sometimes people forget to set that up or call it something else. But if you actually right now you look at the instructions on the installation from the installation docs, the .m file should actually be called .m. It's going to pick up your settings, username, and passwords from that file. So you want to stick, calling it .m. And another thing you want to do is make sure you got your prerequisites down, especially Composer. One of the issues that, or one issue that which I'm going to talk about in a moment when installing the client, people might miss is that you actually need to get your build tools installed on your Linux systems, because some node packages might actually require that. So before we go ahead, when we finish the plug, before we go ahead and start installing the client, we'll talk about one more prerequisite. That's package from Ubuntu. We can actually talk about it right now. On Ubuntu, it's build essential. Once you get that installed, you've got your build tools installed. Another interesting problem, but although I think so far, I think we only had someone reporting this was enabling mod rewrite. So I mentioned the easiest way to actually get that done on the running Ubuntu server is just run that, well, almost any system is use a A2 nmod command to enable mod rewrite. So looking at my screen there, you can actually see that Update has downloaded the packages using Composer and completed migrations using Sphinx. So that means my database is populated with the right tables. So just to show you what I'm talking about, I'm going to go ahead and list my tables. And so yes, this is the Ushahidi database installed. And with that, we most of the API. So yes, so I ran bin update on the installation docs. There's also an option to run bin update with the option to run it with a production switch. So if you want to do that, you can go ahead and do that. But after this is done, you actually have a working API, and we can quickly test this by copying this into our web server directory. Right now I have a vanilla patch installed, so on Ubuntu, so my document root is set at www.html. I'm going to go ahead and copy platform onto there. Okay. So let's try, calling the API. Okay, so that's not.
So does that mean we weren't successful just yet? Like, what happened when you tried to make the API call?
So actually what happened is that for some reason, I'm actually not getting the endpoints listed. But after running update in update, well, it just means that everything was installed. So most likely, a problem with how actually where I've copied my my platform directory to. So this is really related to me hosting it on Apache. But we can actually come back and figure that out after we build the client. So I'll move to talking about installing a client. Again, I cloned the repo from platform client. GitHub. That's what it looks like right now. And again, some prerequisites. We talked about getting building session down, just to make sure your stuff builds, packages that require build. There's also a requirement over here to create a .m file once more, pointing, and that should point to my API. So here's what I'm going to do actually. Assuming you've got your prerequisites done, you've got npm installed, you've got gulp installed. I'm going to go right ahead and actually just run npm install this. And you can see that running. I take a while also depending on number of packages we need to get down.
Okay, so just if I'm getting this correct, you did two different installations. You did one for the API on its own, and then you're doing one for the client as well, and then you link them up together, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The way we do that is by creating a temp file on the client, and there's an option there. There's actually there's a variable there called backend URL that we set. That will point to the API installation we just did, assuming that's hosted correctly. And yeah, so at the end of the day, what you're actually doing is hosting two separate applications, the API and the client. And then pointing the client to the API.
Okay. But I'm sure we'll probably do this when we talk about installing with Heroku. But with Heroku, it does all of that together in the background for you, right? So you don't have, this would be targeted fairly to the guys, developers who are little hardcore techies to some extent.
Okay, so this installation mostly is it's targeted to people who want to host this who want to host stuff on Apache on Linux. With the Heroku, you probably still need to do a bit of the same, because what the Heroku is just giving you is a hosted platform. You're probably going to go through a number of steps. So far, yeah, a bunch of these steps actually. Well, you sort of have to actually go through them, installing installing a lot of these things step by step. If you're familiar with hosting applications on Linux, on Apache or Nginx, then that part should be easy. So normally, what I wanted to focus on in this session was actually just making sure your API and the client are built. And once that's done, actually installing the same applications of web servers or a web server of your choice shouldn't be a problem.
Okie dokes. Thank you.
One day the API should be a package, hopefully, that you could actually just install.
How feasible does that look? Like, I know that we have a lot of stuff that's on the roadmap, but what how like what are our plans around that? Do we see that happening, this year or next year? Or is that something that we're shelving for the time being until we're done with the entire feature set that we're building out?
Yeah, I think after they've done a number of things, actually putting in some new features. Yeah, I think from there we should be able to focus on getting an installer that is much more easier to run the first time round. Hopefully. So right now you're actually watching a game install and doing some of the packages. And when that's done, we have you can go to the next step. Actually, you shouldn't skip the part where we created the totem file. What that does, why we do that, is to point the client to the backend. Right now, by default, we have a backend URL called localhost platform h3 docs, which is where I installed the API just now. The installation, of course, it should change depending on where you want to put your API. So I'll leave it at that. Next thing I want to do right now, final step, is to run gap build. You can see that running.
Yes, we can.
Yes, if for some reason that, depending on your environment, if you're memory constrained and this suddenly stops, just means you need to build this thing in an environment with a bit more memory. That shouldn't happen for you if you're running or installing this on a server. It's just for some reason if you're running on a memory constrained environment, because GAG will require probably 1 GB plus of memory to build. And that's build. So how do you know that this is build? Look at our setup. We have a directory called setup as a server. Going into that directory, we have bunch of directories. And one in particular is a JS directory that shows Galv managed to build and copy everything over to this directory. The next step is actually now hosting server www on a host. Having pointed the backend URL, where you want to go, you actually should be able to put both the API and the client on the server and run them. The way they should look like is
Your screen just went black.
okay.
Oh, screen share ended. Yeah, we're seeing your face. Awesome.
So if once I put in my backend URLs correctly and everything, this should be able to call the API. Basically, give me an Ushahidi homepage showing that your installation works correctly. So yes, of course, assuming that you're familiar with installing sites on virtual hosts, then once your builds are done, you should be able to copy them over to your servers, and everything should be up and running. Yeah.
This is super awesome. Thank you so much for that, Jason. I have just one more question. I know this took us about maybe 30 minutes because we're kind of walking that through so that people understand the different steps.
Yeah.
But what would an ideal, like if someone were to ask how long would it take me to install, what would we tell them? Like, yeah.
So the instructions on the page ask you to bring in some prerequisites. So that would take some time depending on what system you're running. And then so that you should take that into consideration that you need to install PHP plus extensions. Composer won't take long to install. And then you also need to set up Apache or Nginx to run PHP. It's an assumption you made. And on Ubuntu systems, it's actually done for you when you install the mod PHP package. The other thing you might notice that might take long is depending on your internet connections. When you want to install Gulp, the npm packages. Other than that, if you're not actually running into any issues, then installation should take about half an hour on your connection. Less if you can actually, if you have a fast connection. Assuming you're familiar with hosting sites on your platform and you know where to copy things, then it could take you a shorter time.
Okay. All right. I think we'll end the broadcast from here at least and share this out with the wider public. For everybody else out there, we'll be scheduling another hangout so that we can walk you through how to install using Heroku, possibly, and then even just give you a bit of an overview of the development stacks, that you understand everything that Jason kind of walked us through today. If you have any questions or any feedback to share with us, remember you can always reach us on our platform V3 Hip chat room, on GitHub or on IRC. Posting on any one of those three will automatically post on all of them. And be sure to share any bugs or any quirks during the installation process with us via our GitHub issues page. We'll be pasting in all those links for you shortly. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time, Jason, and for that amazing walkthrough. I'm sure that there are very many people out there who will be grateful and will find the installation process easier with this.
Great. That will help.
All right, guys. All right, I'll end the broadcast here. Thanks, guys.